And he swings, hits it high and deep and gone. Still going back. Out of here. Welcome to the big leagues.
Deep to center field, and it is gone.
Wow, his first big league swing is going to be a grand slam, a home run. Swing and drive. Mountain right. Welcome to the show.
It's August 2nd. It is the post-deadline edition of the call-up, and we've got a lot of trades to break down. We got a lot of prospects to talk about, and we are going to rank the top prospects that were moved at the deadline. Of course, we're going to hit on some honorable mentions and then rank the top 10 going from 10 down to 1. I'm Aram Layton. He's Jack McMullen, and this is probably the last episode for those who are watching on YouTube where you're going to see my like old house background kind of vibe to it. The Wi-Fi may be skipping a little bit, so sorry about that, but enjoying the nice Kentucky Lake area while we bring in the deadline. But Jack, this has been a crazy couple days, not only for you just calling games in the evening, but then like trying to monitor the trade world. And you and I did a live stream on the Just Baseball show yesterday, which definitely go check that out because we broke down a lot of the trades from a big league lens and a minor league lens. Of course, this is going to be more the minor league lens, but it was a weird deadline that picked up right in the 11th hour, which was fun. And we got a couple prospect trades and notable trades, I think, right at the buzzer that will be talked about in this episode.
Yeah, a couple things there. Number one, I do think your network connection is stronger at the lake than it is in New York. So I can appreciate this level of connectivity from you, even when you're trying to disconnect, quote unquote. But yeah, like impossible to be disconnected during the deadline. Yesterday was like a crazy day for me. And, like obviously we have busy days pretty much every day at this phase in the baseball season. And at this phase of Just Baseball, but it was like, get up at 7:30, 7:45. And it was like all systems go from 8 a.m. until about 11 p.m. after a ball game with Indy. So it was like, I went to bed. I got one of the best sleeps of the baseball season last night. Yeah. So that was great.
No doubt. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun, just kind of bringing it in, seeing all the moves come. And it's just cool when you can refresh your feed and like there's something happening, almost every single time. It's
also terrifying because you can keep on refreshing and it sucks.
Yeah. Well, and that was the thing. So there was a couple moves right at the 11th hour that were like, whoa, that one got in at the last minute, teams pivoting, things happening. And that's exactly kind of what we're going to highlight here. We'll start with like a bunch of the honorable mention names of players that were moved that I think are interesting. And of course, if we don't go as deep on, Edgar Quero and some of those moves, it's because we talked about it on the last episode. So definitely go check that out. But this is going to be one where we'll talk about every single player, but spend a little bit more time on the trades that we have not discussed. Also, if it's a multi-prospect trade, we will go a little bit deeper on the entire package when we get to that top prospect, if there's two that need to be discussed here. With the honorable mentions, there's a handful of players that I think you could probably interchange at the 9 and 10 range. Like I think there's a pretty solid drop off from the 6 and 7 range below, but you could probably make the case for a bunch of different guys. I want to start with DJ Hers, who was attached with Kevin Made, so you can kind of highlight both those guys as honorable mentions. I don't love Kevin Made that much. He's a good glove with the Cubs, now sent over to the Nationals in that Heimer Candelario trade. Hers was the get here, left-handed pitching prospect who, look, it was a bad year for him last year. He could not throw strikes. The command has still been a challenge for him, but he's gotten it to the point now where he's around the zone enough to have some really good starts. Hers is a funky delivery. It's low 90s, but it gets on you quick, and the changeup is diabolical. And the strikeout numbers are ridiculous. If he can even have fringy command, he could be a back-end starter. A lot of reliever risk here, but I think a talented arm for the Nationals to pick up for a rental. And then Made, look, I don't know if he's going to hit enough. I know a lot of people in the Cubs world were excited about him. At the very least, he's a defensive specialist that his glove will probably be good enough to keep him on the bench of a big league team if he can just improve a little marginally with the stick. So not a bad return for a rental.
No, not at all. Hers is, I think, the clear-cut headliner here, and Hers was, a very flawed prospect. You mentioned it, like This guy walked the world at points, and he was awesome in high A last year, despite walking over 5 guys per 9. He had an ERA in the low 2s, and he was circumventing the walks by not allowing base hits at all, under 5 hits per 9. But he gets to double A, obviously way better competition, walks 33 guys in 31 2/3 innings. So you just can't overcome that. And so far this year, ERA a couple ticks under 4 in double A, and he's walking about 5.5 guys per 9. So you look at his minor league career as a whole, he's got just about 250 innings. He's punching out 13 guys per 9.
Yeah.
That's totally there. But he's walking 5 to 6 guys per 9.
Yeah.
And you just can't survive as a starter at 5.5, 6 walks per 9. I think, yeah, like probably a left-handed reliever, but he's too exciting to pigeonhole there. He's also only 22 years old in double A. So yeah. I think age is on his side. Being a high school draftee is on his side. I think the Nats made out pretty well here.
Yeah, I think they know that they got a big league arm here because at the very least, he's going to go in the bullpen. Stuff ticks up probably to 93, 94 from that slot with the changeup, and he's a good reliever. He's a really solid 7th inning, 8th inning guy that you could feel good about as he develops, but you're also giving him another year or two to try to stick as a starter, try to improve that command. And, maybe that's exactly what you need, So I thought that was a good get for the Nationals who are just looking to stockpile arms. They go get, some infield depth as well. Speaking of infielders and speaking of the National League East, Hao-Yu Lee sent out to the Tigers from the Phillies in return for Michael Lorenzen. It's funny, we say it backwards here at the call up. The prospects go in return for the big leaguers here. But Hao-Yu Lee's had a nice year. He's an interesting prospect who has really put up fantastic offensive numbers over the last 2 seasons, since his last 2 seasons really of full ball, because he played very briefly in 2021 after being signed at 18 years old and just played a little bit at the complex. But in 2022, posted a 131 WRC plus in low A as a 19-year-old, struck out less than 20% of the time. He's a solid infielder. Like I think the glove is kind of fringy. That's coming along, but he gets on base. He doesn't strike out. This year in high A, 283, 372, 401 slash line, 5 home runs, 14 for 17 on the stolen base department. Nothing jumps off the page with Lee. It's a good field to hit. It's a fantastic approach. That might be the one thing that jumps off the page, so to speak. He does not chase, but ceiling's kind of capped. There's another high probability big leaguer that I think has a really good shot at being a utility piece. There's enough sneaky pop in there, 102 mile per hour, 90th percentile exit velocity. Like that's not bad at all. He's flashed a 110 pull side or 109, pull side. Like there's enough there to be an everyday player. And he's just 20 years old. It was an interesting 1-for-1 swap, but I think this was Scott Harris and the Tigers being really high on Hao-Yu Lee and feeling like he can blossom into an everyday infielder.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I like the most is that the numbers are almost exactly the same as what they were last year in low A. Like he jumped up from low A to high A, and you mentioned as a 19-year-old in low A, 20-year-old in high A, like the numbers are nearly identical. Batting average, let's just look at that, 283, 283. OBP, 384, 372. Slug, 415, 401. It's very, very similar there. And the bags are similar. The impact is similar. So I feel good about consistency, knowing that, you are getting that incredibly advanced approach from a 20-year-old. This was a good 1-for-1 swap. And I read something that Dombrowski was not willing to move Johan Rojas. I think they probably could have gone for a better option than Michael Lorenzen if they were willing to move Rojas, but they were not, and they got an all-star this year in Lorenzen.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I like Rojas a lot, and as at least a fourth outfielder, an option that can help them now. And with Pache going down, he's filled into that Pache role really well. So I don't blame Dombrowski not being willing to part with Rojas, and Dombrowski not being willing to part with a prospect. It doesn't mean that Johan Rojas is a generational talent, but it means that they see enough in his skill set that he can help them now. And Lee, of course, is a little ways away, signed for about $500,000, a little bit over that, out of Taiwan a couple years back. So nice get for the Tigers, who you were always going to get somewhat of a meager return for a rental, but I think in this market they did pretty solid. All things considered. Couple more honorable mentions, and then you can fill in on anybody that I miss here, Jack, because I think there's a lot of interesting arms specifically that were moved, but a couple more bats first. Devin Mann. This is another like classic Dodgers prospect that just blocked, a little bit older, maybe doesn't have the defensive prowess and some of the other things to stay in the lineup like a la Ryan Noda. But I mean, the numbers have been fantastic for Devin Mann pretty much at every stop. You won't find a WRC plus under 100 for him in any year of his professional career. And the 26-year-old in AAA this year has a 125 WRC plus, 14 home runs, 400 on base percentage. Yes, he's striking out at a 25% clip, but walks to offset it, power to offset it, and a high BABIP because he hits the ball hard. Mann's limited a little bit defensively in terms of the value you get there, but he hedges that with the ability to play all over the diamond. I thought this was a great get for the Royals. You texted me Devin Mann's going to be a great Royal. Like, I think it's a fun one for them because you got nothing to really lose here. You need bats and just depth. And I think this is a guy that you hope can turn into a regular, but at the very least, you feel pretty good about him being a utility piece that can pack a punch a little bit with the stick.
Yeah, no, he was the rung below Michael Busch on the utility ladder with a bit more defensive versatility there. I guess you could probably look at him as the rung below Miguel Vargas because he fills a more similar role to that of Vargas. Because
but he's
Busch
like multiple rungs then.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. If you just look at the Dodger pecking order, like there's a reason that Noda was blocked within the Dodgers organization. Ryan Ward is a guy that has long been blocked in the Dodgers organization when he would have gotten at least a big league cameo in some other organization, but like they can always turn to a James Outman or a Johnny DeLuca. Devin Mann, I think, was blocked by the idea that Vargas was better than Busch and Busch was better than Mann. I think I saw that Mann is going to Omaha. I don't think he should go to Omaha. I think he's big league ready right now, and he should go play for maybe the worst team in baseball. Honestly, like nobody's really having that conversation because Oakland's so bad, but like Kansas City's brutal. And I think that, especially with some of those guys that are out with injury, like Vinny Pasquantino's out for the rest of the year, like slap man at first base a little bit, give Prado a day in right field or anything like that.
I'm with you. I think it's a matter of time before we see him. I think they just, maybe have some roster things to sort out. But I agree. He should be in the big leagues right now. Nothing left to prove in the minors. And I agree. The Royals are sneakily the worst, especially now subtracting Yarborough in this deal, who's so low-key been one of their best arms. This team stinks, absolutely stinks. But at least they have a little bit more youthful intrigue with Mann and some other pieces that they added. And, Vinny Pasquantino coming back next year, hopefully better and stronger than ever.
Yeah.
Drew Rom also moved. And that was remind me which deal that would have been Rom on top of
Prieto for Flaherty.
Yep. Good job. Thank you. So Rom, interesting because, we know that the Orioles, kind of need all of the arms they can get in their system. But Rom, I think the ceiling's somewhat capped here. He has not put up the best numbers in AAA. And I think Cade Povich has obviously taken a full jump over him and is one of the, if not the best pitching prospect they have with a graduated Grayson Rodriguez and, some of the other guys that have really performed. You got McDermott, you got Seth Johnson, you've got a bunch of other dudes that are very unsung in that system that we could go on and on about. Rom is interesting because I think it's not a bad get for a rental. And also we talk about a team that needs arms. I mean, the Cardinals need arms pretty bad. So to be able to get a Drew Rom here, I think it's an interesting spot to be able to add somebody that gives you some depth, probably closer to Connor Thomas than, what we'd like to admit, but it's just another arm in the fold that's close to big league ready. And you hope maybe like unlock something. The fastball is just pretty meh. And that's been the challenge for him. He mixes in a slider, a sinker, and a splitter. And occasionally, it's just one of those things that I don't know if he's a big league starter. He's probably more of a depth arm, but they get him thrown in there. I was hoping to have a little bit more on him, but I'm even looking at the data right now on the stuff. It's just not that good.
Yeah, and like opponents are hitting 290 against him. Like that's a hard pill to swallow from a guy that you're hoping makes a big league debut, and he hasn't limited hits well enough. And listen, the name of the game is run prevention, and the name of the game is ERA. How are you going to do it? I think whip is excellent. And I've talked to a lot of pitchers that are like, I look at the whip, man. I'm not looking at walks per nine. I'm not looking at hits per nine. Like it's a combination of both. I'm looking at base runners that I allow.
Yep.
If you walk a bunch of guys, you better not be allowing hits. He's walking about 4.5 per nine, which is unfortunate. is it above average, like below average, I guess?
Below average. Yeah, it's below average. Yeah.
Command below average, walks per 9 clip is above the average marker. So below average control in that department, you better be limiting hits big time. And if opponents are hitting 291 against you, like that's a tough pill to swallow because the whip is going to be high. And so far, the whip this year in Norfolk is at 1.7.
Yeah, exactly. And that's an important note to make because, if I walk a guy and then I retire the next 3, it's no different than giving up a single and retiring the next 3.
Exactly. Or a double or a triple.
Yeah, if you retire the next 3. And an example of that's Jackson Wolf, which I actually think is one of the more underrated arms moved at the deadline. A guy that's already made his big league debut in an emergency for the Padres and held his own. And Wolf is a guy that will probably get on the show at some point in the next month or two. This guy's had a bit of a whirlwind between getting called up and then getting traded. But one of the better humans I've interacted with in professional baseball and going back to the Katuitt Kettleers. But Wolf has really seen things click. He's had the velocity tick up. He was a guy that was working in the upper 80s before and now is in the low 90s. But he's a 6'7" lefty from a really funky release point and gets some of the best extension I've seen. You look at the extension numbers, it's up there with anybody in the minor leagues. So yeah, it's only 90, but tough release point, kind of jumps out of his hand a little bit. And it's an extra couple feet closer to home. So averaging 90.5 miles per hour, he's actually picking up really good whiff numbers on the fastball. Opponents hitting 227 against it with a 649 OPS and a very hitter-friendly AA where he was throwing, in that Texas league. Good whiff numbers in the zone and pounds the strike zone. So while Wolf may not miss as many bats at the higher levels as he is right now with a 28% K rate, he doesn't walk a lot of guys. So again, this is an example of keeping that whip in a reasonable spot. Curveball is pretty good. Slider is pretty good. Nothing's plus, but everything's pretty good and plays up from a really good release point. Wolf was dealt in what was it? It was the larger swap with
Choi and
Rich Hill
for Alfonso Rivas, Wolf, and another complex guy.
Yeah, I thought this was a good get for the Pirates here, and hopefully he joins you in Indy very soon. Sure. I know you'll be a big Jackson Wolf fan, but definitely a nice little get for them and a guy that's had a really good year.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, what kind of intrigues me about Wolf and just watching his big league debut too, the arms are flying absolutely everywhere. Like that is a long dude. So that's got to be so hard to pick up. And obviously, Sale was a Cy Young contender year in and year out because the arms were flying everywhere and he was 98. Wolf, arms are flying everywhere, but he's 92. That still plays. Yeah.
Yeah. And you hope there's a tick up there. If there's another tick up, then all of a sudden you've got a potential solid rotation piece. But for now, good arm, fringe 5, swingman type, and a guy that's going to work his butt off and hopefully, keep making the gains that he's making. I'll take a 6'7" lefty arm on an upward trajectory any day of the week when I'm dumping G-Man Choi and Rich Hill, right? Like it's a no-brainer move for the Pirates there to really give up nothing and get something.
For sure.
Going to Joe Boyle, talk about another 6'7" guy here. A little bit different of a profile. Not a lot of strikes. Crazy stuff. I'll say, though, the former Reds prospect is starting to throw more strikes, dare I say it. There's no question about the stuff. There's no question about the swing and miss that he's able to get. He's also walked 19% of batters this year. It's gotten a little bit better as the year has gone on. Boyle was swapped for Sam Moll straight up, and now he's in Oakland. I mean, this is a good get for the A's. I mean, you need to just accumulate upside and hope some of these guys take off. If it doesn't work for Boyle as a starter, I got a fair amount of confidence that he's going to be a high leverage reliever, or at least get a shot there. I know you made the joke. He's like the understudy for Ricky Karcher, but he definitely has a little bit more going for him there. And that slider is disgusting. The fastball touches 101, 102. And again, like he just has to be below average with the command to be a really good reliever. I don't think it's going to happen as a starter though.
Yeah, I was going to say like that ship for me, Joe Boyle, the starting pitcher, is entirely gone. And he started 19 games in Chattanooga so far this year. He's thrown 84 innings. His career mark in the minor leagues, what do you think his walks per 9 is at?
It's got to be 7.
7.6.
Yeah, geez.
He's walking 7.5 guys per 9.
Yeah.
That is totally not okay as a starting pitcher. So that ship has sailed for me. But yeah, man, I mean, if he gets that down to 6.5 instead of 7.5, he's a setup guy, because that shit is disgusting.
It's dirty. We talked about Roberts and Kloffenstein, who came in that trade, from the Blue Jays, and go over to the Cardinals. So if you want more on that trade, check out the last episode. But for those who may have just be discovering us on YouTube, Roberts, solid arm, good mix of several pitches. The problem for him is the fastball quality. His secondaries all have a chance. He has 3 secondaries that I think could be average or better, but the fastball is well below average. It's been pummeled to near 1,000 OPS this season. That's the challenge for Roberts. If Roberts can develop into an average fastball, I love his chances of being a 4-5 starter. And then Kloffenstein, he's been a guy that has seen an uptick this year. He's prospect fatigue because he was drafted in 2018 over a slot high school guy, but he looks good overall. Yeah, and good is relative. He was a guy that had a 6 ERA previously. He's put up good numbers this year. The cutter has really looked solid for him. The stuff has all gone up about a tick across the entire arsenal. I think it's a big league arm in some capacity. So not a bad get, and a big dude that maybe sees another tick up. We got to talk more about the double tick up. I've noticed there's a lot of guys that see 2 ticks at across the span of their minor league career, especially the young high school guys. And, maybe you're hoping for, a double tick here with Kloffenstein. For Hicks, I thought that was a pretty good return.
For sure, especially because it looks like Hicks wants to test the free agent market. If he was going to sign an extension anywhere, it would have been in St. Louis. Like, he's not going to go to Toronto and say, yeah, you know what, let's do it. It sounds like he's going to test the market. It feels like he's going to test the market. And for a market tester, this was a great return. 2 other guys before we jump into the top 10 that I want to highlight real quick. Evan McKendry, a 1-for-1 swap. The Rays, AAA arm, 25-year-old. So yes, he's still got a teensy bit of prospect intrigue, but he is totally a depth starter at this point. McKendry, 1-for-1 swap with Alex Jackson. Alex Jackson, the catcher, goes to Tampa. McKendry goes to Milwaukee. And then Edis Leonard goes from the Dodgers to the Detroit Tigers. Leonard, a guy that has been underwhelming in AA this year at 22 years old, but we're not very far removed from him putting up a 920 OPS season. And I don't he can be a big league middle infielder, I think.
He's worth a flyer. I mean, the defense is pretty rough, but bat speed's really impressive. He's put up good numbers in the past, like you said, maybe change of scenery. And I mean, you got him for free. Might as well see what he can do. McKendry, another just really awesome dude. Excited to he's taken it so far. We talked about a guy that, it gave us nightmares in high school when we had to face him. But, the stuff has kind of been the same. He just knows how to pitch. Cutter, splitter, another changeup that'll mix in there that's almost screwball-y sometimes. And he gets outs. And you look at the minor league numbers, like, he will get you quality starts. I could see him being something similar to what Brian Hoeing was able to do for the Marlins, but maybe a little bit better than that. And you need those emergency depth arms and guys like that just know how to throw. So a good get, there, I think, in a swap for a catcher that you didn't need. And then the best honorable mention probably is Cesar Prieto, right? Who goes over, and that was an interesting one because he goes over for a rental in Jack Flaherty. And I think Prieto was the guy that we were most expecting them to move. He's a little bit older than some of the other guys. You'd rather Connor Norby, who has higher upside. But Prieto, you could probably make the case, could easily be the number 10 guy here because of just the elite bat-to-ball skills. We're talking 90% zone contact. The exit velocities are decent enough to where, I think he could be a big league regular. You need to be able to have that max over 105, and he's got the max up to 108. So there's enough there. He puts the ball on the ground a lot. The complementary tools are not that great, but it's bat to ball, and he puts the ball in play a lot. 7% strikeout rate this season. That's a pretty solid guy to snag for a rental. So I thought that was not bad at all.
And he's slugging 475. So 7% K rate. I expect you to slug about 310, 320. Not the case. He's slugging a little bit. So I can really appreciate that.
One more, actually, because I realized he didn't crack the top 10 for us, Khalil Watson. And some people may be surprised by that because, Watson, former first-round pick, has the upside to be as good as maybe any of the players we talk about here. But I'm starting to just believe that it's becoming decreasingly likely that Khalil Watson figures things out. He is still just 20 years old, but there's just so many moving parts here. The exit velocities haven't been as good as I thought they would be. So hoping that there'd be that plus power to dream on, I don't see it nearly as much. Of course, so Khalil Watson was attached with Gene Segura, sent over to the Guardians. Marlins get Josh Bell and basically effectively pay down Josh Bell to just $8 million next year. So they attach Watson basically to dump Segura's contract and get Josh Bell at a discount. I thought that was a fun move. It's an easy, no-brainer flyer for the Guardians to take if they wanted to move off of Josh Bell. They just got Kyle Manzardo, who we're going to get to. So I think they feel pretty good about the first base situation going into next year as well with Josh Naylor. Watson, though, man, like the power numbers, the 90th percentile exit velocity of 102.5, like that's not what you'd expect for a guy that whiffs as much as he does. The glove at shortstop is pretty rough. He's got the tools to be a good shortstop, but it's just rough in terms of just his ability to, I think, make the routine plays. And then we know about, all of the, off the field and technically on the field issues. One of the pictures that was going around was him pointing the bat at an umpire and saying, like, this is the lasting image of Khalil Watson as a Marlins prospect. Look, maybe a change of scenery is good for him. He doesn't fit the bill of a Guardians prospect at all for several reasons. So it shows you that they're just taking a shot on the upside here, but I just don't think he's shown enough on and off the field to crack the top 10 here.
I was going to say you took about 90 seconds before you got to the makeup thing. And that's one of the Guardians things. Like, Guardians are high makeup farm. Like, that's just how every affiliate is with them. And unfortunately, like, the makeup is a serious concern with Khalil Watson, and double unfortunately, like, that's been made public. And I think that there are a lot of low makeup guys that it's not really known until they get in a consistent interview type setting at the big league level where you're like, like, this guy's not the nicest, friendliest guy. No. But that's been made public, and, let's hope that he can right the ship, because he can be immensely talented. We just have yet to see him tap in. And I think that anybody saying, Khalil Watson was like a lottery type pick like last year or 2021. Okay, but that ship needs to sail. And I think Kim Eng probably looked at that and it's like, okay, that's a loaded thing there. I don't know if we want to deal with that. And we have a chance to go get a big leaguer right now.
100%. He fell in the draft for a reason, and the Marlins are moving on from him for a reason, a system that, could use any position players that they can get right now.
Yeah.
Number 10, we had a tie because TK Roby had to be on the top 10 for me. Just off pure talent. We talked about Roby a lot last episode because he also heads over to St. Louis. But Ryan Bliss, that's a guy that also had to kind of be in the top 10 here. And Bliss, I know you love Ryan Bliss, so we'll talk about that a little bit. But let's start with Roby real quick so we don't have to spend as much time on him. Fastball was like up to 97, 98. I think he's got the potential for a plus breaking ball and then two other above average secondaries. If TK Roby was healthy right now, I don't care about the 5 ERA. If he was healthy right now, I think he's a borderline top 100 prospect arm. But of course, now he's dealing with a shoulder thing. The Rangers, they feel like they're probably moving a high injury risk arm, and they're able to go get somebody that helps them. But in Jordan Montgomery, but I thought this was an interesting one with Roby to take a chance on a guy that could end up being one of your better arms in your system just off pure talent.
Yeah, no, and we talked about this, I think, last time out. It's the true overhead delivery with the fastball and the curveball complement. And if he is 97, 98, I mean, that can play at a bullpen right now, but he's got starter potential. He can go 5-6 innings. So I made the Karinchak comp last time. Like, think about, a subdued version of James Karinchak spread out over 6 innings.
Yeah.
That's going to work.
And the command's good. Like, that's the crazy thing. Like, he pounds the strike zone.
Yeah.
Almost to a fault. I think that was part of the reason why his ERA was high. He's pitching in the Texas League, almost too many strikes. And I think that was part of the reason why, you saw the ERA a little inflated, but I thought he was way better than that ERA. And that was a guy that when we did the Ranger system, I was like, man, Roby, I'm really starting to like this guy.
Yeah.
Someone that you just had to like after seeing what he's done this year is Ryan Bliss. And we saw him in the futures game. He's fun. I don't think anybody was buying tickets to see Ryan Bliss, but the Diamondbacks send him over to Seattle in a larger deal that also included Dominic Canzone and first base Rojas. Exactly. And we get Sewald going the other direction. Canzone, technically a prospect. I guess we could put him in that borderline top 10 range too. Great glove, sneaky EVs, pretty good approach. I think 4th outfielder floor. So, and potential to be a regular, fringe regular, which I think is a nice get. But Bliss is probably the highest upside piece they get here. 23-year-old former 2nd round pick in 2021, who's just really put it all together this year. He focused on cutting down on the whiff. and making more consistent contact. And he's done exactly that. I mean, you look at what he did in the Texas League prior to his promotion to, AAA, where he's kind of still getting his feet under him and, through a dozen games. But in AA, 68 games, 358, 414, 594 slash line, 30 bags, 12 homers. Like, I don't know if the homers are going to translate that well at the big league level, but the bags, the improved bat to ball skills. I still think he's an average hitter, but sneaky pop, really good runner, versatile. He's a fun player. There's some it's a bit reminiscent of a John Birdie type to me. Mm-hmm. One of those players that just flies under the radar, and you look at the end of the year and you're like, oh man, he's 2.5 WAR guy. Like, I think that's exactly what Ryan Bliss could be for Seattle, and they need guys like that.
No, I'm out. Amarillo Merchant. I saw
Amarillo Merchant,
AAA, total Amarillo Merchant. No, I do love the cut down on the swing and miss. Like, do you have in front of you the K rate from high A last year to AA this year?
Yeah, so high A was a 24.4% K rate, AA 17%.
Like, you can thrive with a 17% K rate when you're this fast, but a 25% K rate, 24% K rate, you're cutting it close. Like, it's hard to be a really productive player when the K rate is over 20%. If he can live at the major league level in the 15 to 18% range in terms of K rate, I think that this guy can absolutely be a 2.5 win player. You mentioned because he's such a factor on the base paths, and he's a good defender, man. Like, he seems very good over there. And the reason that he was playing a lot of second base in Amarillo was because Arizona has another shortstop prospect that they were very high on that was in Amarillo. So he could probably play shortstop. His future is more than likely second base, especially with JP Crawford there for the foreseeable future. But Bliss can be up like next year. Like, he could break camp next year if Colton Wong's gone, if they can't really find a replacement at second base.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think that's exactly why they went out and got him. It's like if it doesn't work with Rojas, like, here's another guy that can potentially give us, some production next year at second base. So I like that get for them. Number 9, Marco Vargas. He goes to the Mets. And look, I told you, Marco Vargas is going to sneak onto some top 100 lists relatively soon. I really do believe that. We talked about him in the last episode, so we don't have to go too deep here. But Vargas, part of that deal for David Robertson, and of course, he had Ronald Hernandez attached, so you could probably mention as an honorable mention in this as well. But Vargas, I know looks have been limited for folks. I don't know if you saw like some of the videos on Twitter of his swing. I know everyone doesn't have the same access to like all the video, but this is one of those dudes that you could see one swing and you're like, oh, I see it. In terms of just what people like about him, it's silky smooth from the left side, just barrel lives in the zone, tons of contact, 88% zone contact, overall contact rate of 85%, which is fantastic. The glove has continued to get better, and the EVs are getting better and better as well. What's most impressive to me is that he doesn't chase. He's walked almost twice as much as he struck out. He only has a 15% chase rate this year, 5% swinging strike rate. This is a guy, like, I don't know how high the ceiling is at 5'11", 180 pounds. We'll see how much power he taps into, but he just turned 18 years old. He already has an elite approach and great bat to ball skills. This was a great get for the Mets for a rental reliever, and they already got a prospect on top of that with Hernandez. Vargas is definitely a top 10 guy that was moved at this deadline, just the furthest off. So people probably don't see him on pipelines, rankings, or whatever. But I'm telling you, scouts would put him in the top 10. Some may even say that 9 was too low.
Interesting. Yeah. No, I think if I were to rank the top 3 prospects in baseball just by Twitter swing videos, Roman Anthony would be 1.
Yeah.
Marco Vargas would be 2, and Lazaro Montes with the Mariners would be 3. So I think those are the 3, I guess, house of highlights type guys when I look at swing videos on MILB Twitter. But no, man, I know we talked about Marco Vargas last episode, but yeah, I mean, it just seems advanced for a kid that, is at the complex.
No doubt at all. I mean, he's as advanced as they come. Number 8, Nick Nastrini, who is now a member of the Chicago White Sox. And how about the White Sox, man? Like, we might have to do like an episode in the coming weeks of like updating the White Sox system and what the new top 10 is, because that's going to be a fun update in terms of what the system now looks like after all the moves that they've made. They traded Lance Lynn and Joe Kelly. Nick Nastrini was part of a larger package. We talked about this on the last episode as well. Part of a larger package that included, Nick Nastrini, and it was definitely the highest rated prospect out of that group. I think Prospectus likes Nastrini the most, has him, I think, in their top 60 going into this year. I like him a lot. I mean, the swing and miss is there. We talked about that. The fastball can reach the 97, 98 range. It's ticked down a little bit over his last few starts, which is something to monitor. But a pair of nasty breaking balls, a changeup that when it's in the zone or when he's at least has a decent feel for it, looks like a well above average pitch. He's got a chance for 3 impact secondaries in a mid-90s fastball. It's about command. It's about consistency. And those are 2 big questions, which is why the Dodgers were willing to move off of him with all the other arms they have. But at 23 years old and the stuff that he has, there's no doubting that he was one of the best arms moved at this deadline.
Yeah, no, I mean, he was 54 on Baseball Prospectus's top 100. He's not a top 100 guy, I don't think.
I don't think so.
But he's a back of the rotation guy. I don't want to say surely, because you never have any idea with these guys, but it totally feels like he's a 4 or 5. Feels like a 5.
But he's got more upside than that. I mean, like with the stuff alone, like he's got a number 3 starter stuff, but does it all come together? That's a guy you take a flyer on, if you're the White Sox. No doubt.
And that's a guy that headlines a deal for the highest qualified ERA in baseball.
Yeah. With an expensive Joe Kelly attached.
Yes, exactly. Hey,
So
I think the Dodgers sneakily made out well here. I think that they did a good job going to get, and hey, I'm not just saying this because Lance Lynn looked pretty solid on Tuesday. Like, Lance Lynn's better than a 6.5 ERA.
Yeah.
We make fun of him all the time, but like, he is. And Joe Kelly is still 100 with this like weird low 90s hammer curveball.
And great peripherals. So
yeah. So it was going to take one of those Tulsa driller rotation guys to get it done. And I think, Rick Hahn, like, it was okay. No Sheehan. He probably asked for Frasso, no Frasso. Go and get the college arm, that hey, looks the part. And I like that they went Nastrini over a Kyle Hurt or over a Knack.
Yeah. I would prefer Nastrini over Hurt. And then, like you said, Frasso's, I'm not parting with Frasso over Nastrini. So like, it was one of those like perfect middle ground, still good enough for the White Sox. And I'm sure they settled on that name after, I'm sure Rick Hahn kicked a few other names before that. And they settled on Nastrini, which I think is a good middle ground and a fair middle ground there. And a nice get for them.
Give me Frasso and Vivas.
Yeah. No, thank you,
Rick.
Yeah. Nope. Number 7, we talked about him last episode. I promise we're getting to the final guys that we didn't talk about much, but Thomas Saggese. I think this is one of the most underrated additions at the deadline. The Cardinals getting Saggese on top of, or I would say TK Roby was on top of Saggese in that Montgomery deal. But Montgomery, especially with Erod not getting moved, Montgomery was arguably the best pitcher not named Justin Verlander moved at the deadline statistically. I know Scherzer is awesome, but like Jamon's been better statistically. And they ended up getting both of them anyways in Texas. But Saggese, we talked about how fun he is in terms of he just screams big leaguer. This was such a fun video dive for me a little while back, and then following up now. He's just so perfect for St. Louis. As Brendan Donovan's down for the season, unfortunately, like he reminds me of Brendan Donovan, but no batting gloves, gets some dirt, rubs it in his hands. You see him kind of like wiggle his hips around in the box, like shuffle his feet and just throw his hands at the damn baseball. But this is just a old school player that has really fun tools across the board. Nothing jumps off the page, but everything is solid. You got sneaky above average power, above average feel to hit. I'd say it's probably average power, but above average feel to hit, decent wheels. He gets into his game power well because he puts the ball in the air. So even though the exit velocities are maybe slightly above average, still get plenty of extra base hits and home runs. Feel to hit's really impressive. Approach could use some work. He's aggressive, but it's hard to tell a guy that's consistently hitting 300 at every level to swing less. He's just 21 years old. He can play all over. He's a capable defender at a lot of different spots. I like him a lot. Saggese's a great pickup here for the Cardinals and a really solid prospect.
Yeah, I got to ask you a question. What does the Cardinals middle infield look like moving forward through this year? Because they traded DeYoung and Donovan's done for the year.
It's going to be Mason, Wynn, and Gorman.
Okay, where's Edman?
Ooh, yeah, I forgot about that guy too. Well, they kept Carlson. I don't know. Yeah, I guess Mason Wynn and Edman, and then Gorman is going to be kind of your DH. Yeah.
And I mean, you move O'Neill and Carlson to center and Walker back in left.
I think they're going to make more moves, in the offseason. I really do. But Saggese, I think, they're kind of just looking at him as depth. If one of those guys doesn't quite pan out, or, they have a perfect opportunity to go move, Edman or something like that, then maybe. But I think they just were trying to get the best prospect possible from the Rangers, and for rental, I mean, they got a big leaguer here.
Yeah, no, and I mean, they're probably going to have a middle infield trio that they'll kind of bounce around. And I know that Prieto can play third, and Saggese can probably play third too. If that Memphis team features, I don't know, Saggese at third, Wynn at short, Prieto at second, I'm going to watch a lot of Memphis Redbirds games.
That's fun.
That is fun.
I like it. Yeah, no, they've got a lot of infield depth all of a sudden. That's why I think they might move one of these guys, but it'll be fun to see what they do.
Yeah.
Ryan Clifford, number 6. Astros move a guy that we were talking about over the last few months, of just someone that's just had a ton of helium, and then I've really started to like. It was funny because Bob Nightingale said, well, first he called Drew Gilbert Logan Gilbert, and then he called Ryan Clifford a fringe prospect. Yeah. And I think that was the more egregious I guess omission, is not even saying Ryan Clifford, just saying fringe prospect, because I think he's closer to fringe top 100 than fringe prospect. I mean, this is a guy that got late second round money in 2022. So you look at 11th round pick, like, nah, don't worry about that. He was a late second round pick, big time power. I comped him to our managing editor, Ryan Finkelstein, who was curious about what the Mets were getting here in that Verlander deal. I said he looks like a lefty Mark Vientos. And I really think that is a similar profile. I would say the approach is actually more advanced than Vientos at that stage. And the exit velocities, 107 mile per hour, 90th percentile exit velocity, 18 home runs. You say, yeah, Asheville is a hitter-friendly environment. Doesn't matter when you hit it 443 at 110, which is what he did not too long ago, and 450 at 106. He also hit an Oppo home run, 450 at 108. This guy's got silly juice. Even if he ends up at first base, it's a good get on top of the guy that we're going to talk about in a minute, and Drew Gilbert, who's one of the best prospects moved at the deadline.
So the way that I kind of look at park factor and the way I look at hitter-friendly environments is, okay, distance is going to change. Home run totals are going to change. Exit velo is not going to change, man. Nope. Like, if you're popping 112s, you're going to do that in the Florida sun. You're going to do that in the mountains. Like, that's just going to happen. And that reading is taken right off the barrel. So I can really appreciate how freaking strong Ryan Clifford is at this young of an age. Notice I can tell, like, all of the, I don't know, I guess big name talking heads on Twitter, fringe prospect, yeah, like that was egregious, but also how about minor leaguer? You know what I mean? Like minor leaguer Ryan Bliss, minor leaguer Clifford. Like, it's just, it doesn't make any sense to me, because they're more than that. They're big time prospects here. Gilbert, I think, was the headliner, clearly the headliner. I know that there are some people out there that like Clifford's ceiling a bit more than Gilbert's, just because the power is immense and Gilbert doesn't have that kind of pop. Gilbert seems a bit more well-rounded, and I know we're going to talk about Gilbert here in a matter of moments, but Clifford, man, with how strong that guy is and where the numbers are at that young of an age, this was a guy that I was IDing, and it's like, if somebody gets this guy, they're going to be happy campers. And I think that the Mets made out really well.
I agree. And just to highlight here, 12 batted balls this year already, 110 plus miles per hour.
You don't see that from 20-year-olds, 19-year-old, 20-year-olds.
No, and a max of 114 this year. That's some silly pop. And the whiff's not bad. We're talking 82% zone contact. We're talking overall contact rate of 76%. That's fine.
Yeah,
that plays. So I'm excited about this guy. Again, the defensive limitations are, probably why they were willing to move off of him. But he is a really solid get for, this Mets team that's looking to overhaul the system, and they use money to do it. And I don't know what I was more surprised about, but we'll get to it when we get to Gilbert. I don't know if it was that they moved Drew Gilbert or that Ryan Clifford would be on top of a Drew Gilbert. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't think they'd move Gilbert, but I can understand, because like there's scouts that like Melton more, and Melton has continued to grow on me. I really like him. So I can understand maybe moving a Drew Gilbert if you really like Melton internally. but I guess it was maybe adding Clifford on top. But it shows you, I mean, when you get a Justin Verlander with all that money, you get a pretty nice prospect return. So that was pretty fun to see the Mets kind of restock this farm system, whether it's, I know they're kind of buying a farm system, but if you can't buy a good team, might as well buy a farm system. And they're doing just that. Uncle Steve is cooking.
Do you think they won at the deadline? Like, I'm trying to think about winners and losers. We're about to do that on the Just Baseball show.
I always think it's funny, like winners and losers, because it's like you're winning because you lost. Like the Mets lost, so now they're winning. It's easy to win when you're trading a Hall of Famer and eating money. But right. I'll give them.
I think the White Sox. I think the White Sox were one of the biggest winners at the deadline. But they're having a season from hell this year. How can I call them a winner?
And the Mets, I think, accumulated way more prospect capital because they attached, again, tens of millions of dollars to future Hall of Famers. So it's hard to call that a winner. I think they did a great job. So in a vacuum, they're winners. But I think the White Sox did more with less, if that makes sense. Imagine if you gave Rick Hahn unlimited money. I don't even like, I think Rick Hahn's bad, but like you gave him unlimited money to just buy prospects on top of the guys that they were trading. I think they could have cooked a little bit more, made a little bit more of a difference. But leading into this, though, they got a prospect. I think they got arguably the best arm moved at this deadline, maybe the best arm moved at this deadline at number 5 in Jake Eder. And Eder is somebody that, goes from the Marlins to the White Sox in a move for Jake Burger, which is a fun one because, the Marlins need power in the worst way. And I think that they were dangling Eder in a few different ways. Those talks fell through from what I was told in terms of like they had some other things in the works with Eder around it. And I think the Marlins looked at the deadline like 2 hours away and said, man, we can't just hold on to Eder and just roll. Like we need to absolutely, cash in Eder in some way. And they added Jake Burger, who gives them power. Eder is somebody that I think the White Sox picked up at the perfect time. I've been monitoring his starts. I pretty much don't miss many of them. As you know, my good friend Griffin Conine plays on the same team. So I'm usually tuned into most games, at least passively, and just watching. And I always, look at most of the starts of any relevant prospect the next day. But I watched Jake Eder's last start, and he looked like the guy from 2021. And it takes time off of Tommy John surgery and the tacked ball. And what I was told digging around a little bit there too, it was a weird feel on the slider with the tacked ball, especially coming off and not throwing that much and throwing with different balls kind of as you're coming back from TJ. He was, I think through the first 3-4 starts of the year, he was not getting really any whiffs on the slider. It wasn't there for him. He was just surviving on fastball changeup, which the changeup was barely even a pitch from the past. The slider was that 70 pitch. Last couple starts, the slider has been there. And what has Jake Eder done? The last 2 starts, he's gone 10 2/3 innings, 18 strikeouts, and just 3 earned runs. Huge whiff numbers on the slider as well. He looks back. And I think this is a guy that looks like he has middle rotation upside, high probability back into the rotation starter who has great stuff. And I think he's on an upward trajectory. Eder was a great get for the White Sox here.
This was one of those deals that I think everybody was really quick to take a side. Like, oh, White Sox fleeced here. Like, oh, what an overpay. And I think a lot of, other people were saying, oh, I can see that, but like the Marlins got exactly what they needed in Burger. It's tough to depart with an Eder. I think this was a very mutually beneficial trade. I think the Marlins got a controllable power bat that they can use for the foreseeable future, especially after shipping Garrett Cooper. We talked about this on the live show yesterday. I think he is a younger, probably more powerful version of Garrett Cooper. And you said probably a bit more whiff, but he's got a better defensive home, I think, too. So, I thought this was a mutually beneficial deal, but with this being the 1-for-1 swap here, the White Sox made 2 1-for-1 swaps. It was Kendall Graveman for Corey Lee. Corey Lee is not the caliber of player that Jake Eder is, but Jake Burger is a lot better than Kendall Graveman is at that contract and with how much time is left remaining. So no, man, I thought this was massive for both sides. I thought it was really creative. Like nobody was talking about Burger at all.
No. And for the White Sox, like you don't necessarily need a Jake Burger. Like he's been
he was fool's gold this year.
Yeah.
You weren't expecting anything from a guy that played a combined like 60 games his first 2 years in the big league.
And to turn that into a guy that, other than Noah Schultz, right? Jake Eder's got to be their best pitching prospect.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can make the case, like, I mean,
in the system.
Noah Schultz has high upside. I mean, it was exorbitant upside, and I think people will take Schultz over him. But in terms of proximity, Eder will be up with the big league team next year and be in that rotation, I think.
Did they get the number 3 prospect in the organization here? It probably goes Colson 1, Schultz 2. It's probably Brian Ramos, Edgar Quero, or Jake Eder.
Yeah, no, I think he's right there. And I think all those guys are interchangeable. I'm very high on Brian Ramos compared to most. He's been hurt this year, but I love him. And I think that's also part of the reason why they're willing to move, somebody like a Jake Burger, because you have Moncada still, you're stuck to him. You're stuck with him. You have Sosa, who could potentially, play all over the infield. And you have a Brian Ramos, who I actually think could be a really good big league power bat. So number 4. Another White Sox prospect. We've talked plenty about him, so we don't need to go too deep into it. And for the sake of time, as we approach an hour, we can just kind of go quick on Edgar Quero. But I mean, to get Edgar Quero and a deal for Giolito with Kai Busch included, that was awesome. Quero, probably their catcher by mid-season, late season next year. He's gotten better and better at limiting the running game. I mean, the blocking needs to get better and the receiving can get a little bit better. But I think he is a guy that is definitely a prospect fatigue victim, because we've talked about it. He got a very aggressive assignment to work with the coaches that the Angels preferred him to work with in AA in Rocket City. And of course, you're going to have some challenges with the tacked ball as a 19-year-old, now 20 years old, switch hitting catcher, skipping high A. He straight up skipped high A. And then people are like, oh, why are the numbers not that good? Well, he skipped high A and he's a 104 WRC plus. It's not that bad. He's walking more than he strikes out. Yes, I'd like to see more power, but this dude had a 150 WRC plus as a 19-year-old in low A last year. And hit 17 home runs and put up, at least slightly above average EVs. Quero's a good player, and he's the future of the catching position for them. Corey Lee can hold it down in the meantime. I thought this was perfect.
When he taps into more power, not if, when. When he just gets older, spends more time in a professional weight room and on a training program, when this guy taps into more power, that WRC plus is going to skyrocket immediately because he's already walking. And you mentioned the bat to ball. He gives himself enough of a chance to make things happen. And once balls start flying, I mean, this guy can become a really good offensive piece. And it seems like he is on the trajectory to becoming a really solid defensive catcher. Not like Jefferson Carroll level, but
no,
I mean, he can still be good.
Yeah.
Welcome to the White Sox organization. You're playing Rocket City this week.
Yeah.
It's
Isn't that
so
funny?
weird.
That's so the most bizarre part. I think Evan McKendry and Alex Jackson switched clubhouses, I'm pretty sure, in AAA.
Yes.
Last thing on Quero, 86% zone contact, 80% contact rate. Those are both fantastic figures for a 20-year-old at that level. I think he will learn to leverage more of that contact into slug as he just matures and gets more physically mature as well, as you said. Number 3, and I think you could interchange 3 and 2 pretty easily. You can make a different case for any of these top 3 guys, but we'll make the case. And this is a little bit of a clue into the top 100. Number 3 is Drew Gilbert. Drew Gilbert, the other piece, along with Ryan Clifford, moved for future Hall of Famer Justin Verlander, and Drew Gilbert is just a really solid prospect. I wouldn't say it's divisive because everybody, I think, is the consensus is this guy's going to be a big leaguer in some capacity. I think what's divisive about the Astros is some had Melton above, some had Gilbert above, some had Denzenzo above, which is interesting. There's a lot of different opinions on on these 55 future value prospects that the Astros just crushed by getting in that draft class, even though they had one of the smallest draft pools. I think Kylie McDaniel pointed that out, which is really impressive. That's what the Astros do. Gilbert, 22 years old, center fielder, goes to the Mets, and just such a high probability big leaguer. I see 50 to 55 grades across the board. Gets into his power in games pretty well. Good athlete. Great jumps in center field. Such a natural baseball player, just period. As lazy as that is, it's just really the game comes easy to him. His approach continues to get better, but that's one area that I think he could get a little bit better at. He's handled a pretty aggressive assignment, straight to double. Just plays the game well. And he was a guy that impressed me on the backfield, just the way he went about things. And I think there's more power in there to unlock, even though he's only 5'9", 200 pounds. He's a fun player. And I think this is instantly one of the better prospects, if not one of the best prospects in the Mets system. really good get here for a guy that can play a good center and swing it and give you all the little complementary tools you want.
Yeah, he had a really bad June. And like, we don't like playing the what if game. Like, oh, what if he didn't suck for a month? Like, yeah, if he didn't suck for a month, then he would be an 1,000 OPS guy, but he would actually be a 950 OPS guy if he didn't have a miserable June. It was like a $177, and it was like a 560 OPS in June. If this guy doesn't go through a bad month, we're talking about this guy as top 40 prospect in baseball, I think. Now he's in, what do you think, the 50 to 70 range, somewhere in there?
Yeah, probably. Like, I'm still kicking the tires on that. I think he's somewhere in that like 60, 70 range.
Yeah, but I mean, if this guy is putting up a 950 instead of like an 820, it's like, oh, okay, he's for real, and let's push him to triple right now. He's going through an acclimation process. Being a college draftee last year, it's kind of hard to survive in double unless your name is, like Dylan Cruz or something like that. And we don't even know if Dylan Cruz is going to survive in double. So, Gilbert, I think, was a guy that people soured on right before the draft because, he was the one that kind of showed up and umpired during the super regional and was like, what are we doing here? But I mean, it's really easy to kind of mature from that moment, especially when that is the peak of your career at that point. Yeah. Now you're a pro ball player. He can handle himself like a pro. And I mean, he looks good across the board.
And I've heard nothing but good things about him as a person and the way he goes.
Anybody can have a slip up like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's intensity too. Like, there's a line and you learn how to draw that line with the intensity, but you like that fire from your players. You like to see that. It's just, kind of reining it in. The breaking balls have been a little bit more of a challenge in double, but he does ride, a nice little 10-game streak into, the Mets organization where he has 15 hits, a pair of home runs, and 5 doubles over his last 10. So, that'll play. Getting into the final 2 prospects here. Kyle Manzardo. How about that? Who would have thought? Kyle Manzardo from the Rays gets moved over to Cleveland. Maybe part of the reason why they were willing to move off of Josh Bell. That was for Aaron Savali. Steep price to pay, but Aaron Savali was beyond just the Hall of Famers with bajillion dollars attached to them. Pretty much the only arm with control that was moved at the deadline. So you got to give to get. Manzardo, very good. Has had a disappointing year, relatively speaking, which I'm going to get into because that was a fun dive I did. I have a tweet kind of breaking it all down on my personal Twitter where you can kind of see a little bit more on, why Manzardo maybe has not had the year that we expected. He was 22 at the start of the year in AAA, so young for the level. Just made a mockery of high A and double A competition last year. Just hit for average, got on base at over 400 clip, hit for power, but they wanted to see more game power. He wanted to see more game power. And the focus has been trying to get into more game power. And I think that he's been kind of caught in between this year. Still 238, 342, 442 slash line. If that's your down year, man, with 11 pumps and a 21% K rate, I'll take it. Let's see how he builds off of this in Cleveland. And he's such a Cleveland Guardian type prospect in terms of the bat to ball with the sneaky pop and the way he his profile offensively.
He's totally got enough power to, I don't know, almost, you make a nice point. He's bat to ball. He's, I guess, hit tool over pop, but he's got enough pop for pop to still be a part of his game, if that makes any sense at all. Cleveland usually has guys where it's like, okay, you can hit 300, but you're going to slug 370. That's not Manzardo. He can hit 290, but he can slug 500. That's absolutely what he can do.
Well, the problem is the slug 500 is he's capable of it. It's just trying to figure out how to get into it more. And this year he has hit the ball a lot harder, which is why I think he's been largely unlucky. And you won't hear me say that about a lot of prospects. I think that's a cop out. I do think he's been largely unlucky, but I also think part of it is kind of what he's trying to do. Average exit velocity is up 2 miles per hour. 90th percentile exit velocity is up 2 miles per hour. Ground ball rate is down 8%, and his BABIP is down almost 100 points, right around 80 points. He has one of the lowest ground ball rates in the entire AAA league. Mm-hmm. So I think that's him kind of trying to sell out for power. And I would say, like, there's a balance here because the goal for more power is good. You're a first baseman, and that's ultimately what's going to make him a big league regular at first base. But a fly ball at the track is not better than a line drive back up the box. That said, the more fly balls you hit, the more chance you have to hit a home run. So it's like this painful balance that you have to find. And a lot of guys end up finding it through leveraging their hitters counts. And then when they're not in those hitters counts or they're early in the count, even they're the plus hit tool guy who's looking to spray. I think Freddie Freeman's a perfect example of that. Freeman's got big power, but that's not who he is. He's using the whole field. But if he gets that 2-0 count, then he's hunting. So that's a nuance that I think is going to come as Manzardo gets more at bats. Like, remember, this guy's only had one full professional season. That was last year. That's it. So this is his second full professional season where he's trying to adjust from the elite bat to ball guy to first base caliber power. And I think he's going to strike that balance. I think it'll come.
Yeah, no, and I just put out like the numbers, including this, I guess, rough go of it in triple. 179 minor league games for Kyle Manzardo in his career, slashing 291, 392, 543. That's a 935 OPS, 179 games, 50 doubles, 35 homers, 127 driven in, 14% walk rate, 18% K rate.
Yeah.
Try poking a hole in that.
Yeah. No, it'll come together. He will find the balance. Great get for the Guardians. On the flip side, the Rays, they see a guy that they're going to have to add to their 40-man by next year. He's Rule 5 eligible in December of 2024. And on top of that, you have Curtis Mead, who's ahead of him. You have Junior Caminero, who looks like a corner guy who is one of the best prospects in the game. You have Yandy Diaz under plenty of control. You have Isaac Paredes under plenty of control. You have Xavier Isaac emerging as a higher upside first baseman. He's further off, but higher upside it's stupid power. So you've got all this depth, and then you've got even like an Austin Shenton. You've got Jonathan Aranda still there somehow. Like, you've got so many guys that I think it was palatable to part with Manzardo when you have already production at first base, and you can clutch onto the higher upside first base / third base options.
Can we play a game real quick? It's not even a game. I'm just going to tell you what's going on here on the multi-year spending summary for the Tampa Bay Rays on Spotrac. Yandy Diaz makes 6 this year, 8 next year, 10 in 25, and a club option for 12 in 2026. Randy Arozarena has 3 years of ARB left after this. He's a Super 2 guy. Savali has 2 years of ARB left. I mean, you keep on going, man. Like, McClanahan is a Super 2 guy. He's got 4 years of control left. Isaac Paredes, Super 2 guy, 4 years of control left. It's incredible what they do.
Yeah, they were gonna have to work to find a spot for Manzardo. So
they're gonna have to work to find a spot for Aranda.
Yeah, and yeah, so I think this was a worthy move, even though it was a steep price in a vacuum. Last but not least, we got number 1, and it's the best prospect moved at the deadline. And some may not have him ranked ahead of the other 2 that we talked about, but he's a guy that's really grown on me over the last several months and has made all the improvements that I've needed to see. Luisangel Acuna also going to the Mets in that Max Scherzer deal from the Rangers. Luisangel Acuna, again, not going to have the 80 grade tools that his brother has in Ronald Acuna, but this is a dude that I think has made every improvement I wanted to see across the board. Improved, his lower half to the point where he's not drifting as much. Now he's able to handle velocity much better. He's seen a 200 to 300 OPS bump to his batting average, to his numbers against 94 plus miles per hour. He hits breaking ball as well. His defense at shortstop is borderline plus, but he can also play center field now a little bit. He can also play second. He can also play third. The exit velocities are above average. He's 21 years old in Double-A, running a 19% K rate with a 311, 373, 448 slash line. He's one of the most elite base stealers in the minor leagues, over 40 bags already. This is a guy that's it's tools across the board. It's a really sound game. It's a balance of high floor, but with some good complementary tools that give him a little bit higher of a ceiling than most players with his profile. I think Luisangel Acuna is still kind of underrated. Getting traded to the Mets is the best thing to do for somebody that's underrated. He'll soon be somehow overrated, but this is a dude that I think should be on every top 100 list. I think he's closer to top 50 than back half top 100. It's really hard to poke a hole in this guy's game.
I think he's already overrated. He went 0 for 4 in his Rumble Ponies debut. I think he is a Texas League merchant, much like Ryan Bliss.
Yes.
And I think that he shouldn't be in the top 10 of this list.
Yes.
Acuna is awesome. I'm a huge fan. And the thing that kind of gets me going is 42 for 47 in the stolen base department. Yeah. Like, it's hard for that not to get you going.
In 84 games. I mean, and how about a 19% punch out rate as a 21-year-old in the Texas League? Texas League, yes, it's hitter friendly for power, but it is a hard place to hit in terms of like not striking out. There's a ton of nasty arms. The Tulsa Drillers alone in that league, but there's a lot. Like, the strikeout rate in that league was closer to the tacked ball Southern League than people would think because of just how nasty the arms are in that league. Like the Southern League has no good arms, especially now. Like you look at it with the guys getting pushed up quickly, Yuri out of there, Smith.
They had some good ones at the top, like AJ and Abbott,
but they were out quick, like made a few starts, gone. And a lot of these guys in the Texas League have been there all year. So I think it's really impressive to have that strikeout rate under 20%, to have the walk rate in his professional career over 10%, still hanging around at 9% this year. How much power he will hit for will be the question. But again, if you're playing great defense, if you're an elite base stealer, and if you got good bat to ball skills, I'll take 10 to 15 home run pop because everything else is going to play.
Yeah.
That'll do it. That's our top prospects moved at the deadline. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please subscribe to our YouTube and also leave us a rating on the audio side. Interview with Gordon Graceffo of the Cardinals system coming out on Friday. Some other fun interviews in the pipeline as well as we get into the second half and the final stretch of the season here. Jack, any final thoughts?
I don't think so. I loved this deadline. I said it at the end of the live stream. I'm a sucker for a seller's market, and this was so clearly a seller's market, and it's very fun. It's fun for the minor league people, the prospect heads, to see massive returns for these guys. And do I think a lot of these deals were quote unquote overpays? I do. I think Jake Burger for Jake Eder is kind of insane. Yeah. But that was the market this year. And Manzardo for Zavali, insane last year, the market this year. And I love when that's the market.
When you want to upgrade your team, you better pay up. And it's fun to see some of these prospects change hands. It's always a little rush, but we'll be talking more about how these guys get acclimated to their new spots. Top 100 list is coming very, very, very soon. So look out for that. And as always, thank you for listening. We'll talk prospects with you on Friday.